A lot of people always think of the perception of a coach. You don't need a coach. You're better than a coach and all those types of things. But what they do is teach you all the ins and outs of learning data, learning tracks, wet, dry, all the different conditions that can face you. Everything on a day-to-day basis that really a driver isn't exposed to until they have quite a lot of experience in the sport. And I was very fortunate that literally from the second I got an open wheel car the first time, I had Mike Zimicki working with me.
I try to cover all the bases. Prior to in terms of looking at the athlete as a 24-hour athlete, I try to make sure that their nutrition is right, their training is right, the stuff they do on the track is right, the stuff they do off the track at the race weekend is right. So it's basically just try to cover all the bases of anything that may affect their driving, and that includes babysitting, that includes dealing with parents, that includes dealings with sponsors, that includes talking to them about how they do interviews and marketing and whatever else. If there's any advice that I can get through my 30 years of being at the racetrack, I try to make sure that those are all coming into play. There definitely is a process to the race weekend, and going into it, and a lot of that is just looking at it and saying, here's what my plan is, here's the plan I'm going to stick to regardless of what happens. And going in, and that's also with the team besides yourself. If you haven't been to the racetrack before, it's like, okay, what are my expectations for that first session? I'm pretty good at learning a racetrack, but I'm going to be struggling there a little bit. I won't know the subtleties as well as I should. That goes back to some of the preparation work we talked about. But just getting as much of that expectation out of the way and saying, okay, this is where I need to be. This is how the weekend flow is going to go is very important. If you just won the last 3 races, but you're showing up at a racetrack you haven't run before, there's 3 people that have done championships that have, surrounded that racetrack or been based at that racetrack, then you know you're going to play catch-up. Prep work usually starts at the end of the last race, which means that you sit down after you finish a race, you sit down, and if you've got time at the racetrack, you can sit down with your engineer and your coach or just yourself, or you can do it on the plane or do it at home when you get home. But you basically do a debrief of that weekend, a race weekend report. And that in itself allows you to start to work on the next weekend because it shows you your strengths and weaknesses, what went wrong, what didn't. And those are usually quite brutally honest. You go through and you list everything and you say, on Saturday, this is what happened. And it may be a mental problem, there may have been a mistake in the car setup or whatever. And you go through that and you review that, and it kind of sets a template for, here are the good things that happened, here are the bad things that happened over the weekend. And that sort of starts you on the prep for your next race weekend.
It'll be a green stop. We'll be doing tires and fuel.
There's no magic. There's just good basics. If you look at, the dominant IndyCar team of the past 2 years, which has been Target, Chip Ganassi, if you look at them, they just run a really tidy program. I don't think they have the trickiest cars. I don't think they have the trickiest parts, but they have the stuff that works, and they know how to make it work. And when you start looking for the magic bullet or looking at somebody else and going, oh my God, they're running less downforce than us and they're going a second faster, it might not be because of the downforce. It's easy to make those assumptions, but you have to look at the overall picture and go, what else have they changed to find that time? Are they just out driving us? Have they found more grip somewhere else that allows them to take the downforce off? Those would be obvious questions to ask before just making the assumption, oh, just less downforce is going to be the magic.
We'll shut the engine off and we got to do this here.
Data goes right back to my basic premise of you don't want to start a session with more than 3 things to work on. And when you look at the data, the first thing you want to do is if you've got a teammate to compare to or if you're comparing to your best laps or perhaps data from another year, is you look at it and you just look at the pattern of what is different. Are we slow in the fast corners? Are we fast in the fast corners? Where are we losing our time? And then you just look at that and you try to just decipher that. And if there's a little bit of a mystery to it, like how come the car handling is not good in turn 10 when it's good in the other 8 corners, or in 8 other corners, then you start looking at some more of the knowledge you might have. Is there a bump there? Is there a patch there? Is there something that the driver is not dealing with? Or perhaps the way our car is, it's not handling that pavement change well. And then you start to look at that, and it's like, okay, so where do we need to make improvements? So you look at the data to fix specific problems. And I think one of the biggest problems people get with data is there's so many channels of information as they start looking at every lap, they start looking at every channel of information, and they look at it just to try and find stuff versus trying to find a specific answer. And I think if you look at the data as a pattern overall and you're like, okay, what do I need to try to figure out, then you go and look for the answers in the data versus just getting that massive knowledge.
About 5 more laps, gang. 5 more.
The biggest thing that a driver needs besides talent, and talent is not the end thing, but is a work ethic. I think if you take drivers, I can't tell you the number of examples I know of drivers that have had a great start in motor racing and have, everybody's, oh, they're a natural, they're going to be the next Formula One world champion, they're going to be a superstar. And either they believe that hype or they haven't had to work hard to get that initial bump in performance. And actually, I much prefer a person that has had to work hard from the beginning, because they've got a work ethic, they understand what they're doing, they don't have to make a transition to that work ethic at some point, and they're much more likely just to realize that it's a job earlier and do the work.
Safety is key, and that means being prepared, being a thinking man out on the racetrack. Certainly there are a lot of analogies and a lot of advice that's given, and as a young driver sometimes you can be past that and have your focus on the win or the lap time, but certainly it is key of making it to the big leagues.